Here is our course content for Spring Boot course tutorial series. In this tutorial series, we will discuss on what is Spring and what is Spring Boot, initializing a Spring Boot project, examining the initialized Spring Boot project structure, and then writing a Spring Boot application. Spring Framework is a Java platform that provides comprehensive infrastructure support for developing Java application. The most common types of application developed were browser-based web application backed by relational databases. Then now, what is Spring Boot? Java Spring Boot is a tool that makes developing web application and microservices with Java Spring Framework faster and easier. It is a project that is built on top of Spring Framework. It is a Spring module that provides the rapid application development feature to the Spring Framework. Spring Boot is the development of Spring application. The version called Spring Boot enables automatic configuration, making it possible for Spring to intelligently detect what kind of application you are building. Initialize a Spring Boot project, we will go to Spring website, and the first thing I will show you is that how to initialize using Spring in spring.io website, and later we will look at how to initialize it in both IntelliJ and Spring Suite tool, which is STS. Now let's look at how to initialize Spring Boot project. Now let's go to spring.io. Here is spring.io. You see here that we have Spring initializer. We will add dependency support. It will give us a support to able to have our functionality as we need. It have some libraries that will support our functionality. So now let's add dependency of this project one by one. Okay, now let's look at web. Because it is web application, so we need to add dependency for web application. This is with Spring Web, and after adding these, we also need H2 database, which is embedded Java database. By searching H2, we will have this H2 database. Now we added two dependencies, and we also need Thymeleaf. Thymeleaf is a template, HTML template, which we use to a modern server Java template engine for both web and standalone environment. Allows HTML to be correctly displayed in browser as a static prototype. Okay, now we added Thymeleaf, and then we need also Spring Data JPA. Okay, persist data in SQL. It helps us to persist data in SQL with Java Persistent API using Spring Data and Hibernate. Now that let's see how many dependencies we added in our application. So we have Spring Web, and then we have H2 database, which is embedded database that we use to store our data, and then we have template, which is HTML, and then we also have Spring Data JPA. Now let's look at how we can now initialize the project. I will use Maven. Here it is a build tool which we will discuss earlier when examining our project. So I choose Maven here, and then language we are using Java. Okay, so we have Spring Boot version. Here it is 3.1.0. and then let's choose the artifact name and description. Let me start with the description and then web. Let's add the description at web application, and then package name, let's name the package name as web application. Also, I add the package name as web application when we start new project that we will build something like a reading list or something like a customer list. We will name the package name as customer list. Whatever the project name, we will name it with the project name. But here, what we just name it web application, since that we are just initializing the project and then examining what we initialize. And then at the same time, this artifact, we will name it web application also. And then this, I will name this as coding techniques. Okay, web application, name web application, and then let's add demo here to be more specific. Description, web application demo. Okay, after finishing all these, here we have Java 17, but I prefer Java 11. Okay, now what we will do is to generate. After generating this, here we have a zip file of web application. Now let's show in folder. Here is the download this web application. Now we need to extract it here. Now that I extract it, here is what we have, and we will import this to our project and run it. So let me enter this. Here we have source, here we have Java resources. Okay, if you have something the same as this, so we will just go to Spring, we will just go to IntelliJ IDE. Okay, now I am using IntelliJ IDE Community Edition. This is my IntelliJ version, and if you have not downloaded this, you will just go to setting. I already make tutorial on how to download Spring Assistant, because you need Spring Assistant in IntelliJ Community Edition to start your project. And if we navigate, we go to plugin. I have already installed my own. Here is Spring Assistant. This is IntelliJ, and if you did not install, you will just search Spring Assistant here. Okay, now let's import this project that we just created. Now open, we will just go to download, because the project is in download. Now let me check download, and let me download. Sorry, now we will cancel this and go to download again, because it is in download. We will just go to open. Okay, here we have download. This loading. And after, because I have some file, after it finish loading, it will display all the files that we, and after displaying this file, we will choose our project. This displayed easily, but we have some issues here. Okay, now it displayed. Let's check for our web application. I think here is the web application that we are looking for. Now it is loading the web application, and it may take some time to load this web application that we created. It asking if it is this window or a new window. Let's add it in new window. Here is our just initialized Spring application. Now let's look at what we have here. I am running this project in IntelliJ, and if you want to initialize the project in IntelliJ, you will just go to new project, and then here is the Spring Assistant plugin that we have. Then next, it is connecting to the Spring.io where we created the project phase, and we will choose the same thing as we choose earlier. You will change it to web application as what we have here. Here is the same thing that we will have to do and add some dependencies. And let's go back to IntelliJ. You see, and if I click next, it will take us to where we choose our dependencies. And if I choose Spring Web, you see I added Spring Web to dependency, which is because it is web application. And then we have H2 database, and then we have Thymeleaf template, and then at the same time we also have JPA Spring. Here is the 4 dependencies we added, and let's look at here. So here are the Spring Web, H2 database, Thymeleaf, and Spring Data JPA. Okay, so you will just have to click next and continue with your application. So we already have one here, so let's try to examine this application. But before we examine this application, I need to examine this application in the Spring Suite Tool STS, not here in IntelliJ. Okay, now that I have this, so let me create a new project, and I show you how to create this in IntelliJ. I show you how to create the same project in the Spring.io. Now I am here in the STS, which is Spring Suite Tool. Okay, now let me create. Here we have Spring Starter project, and then here service URL we have springs.io. Now I have Marvin here, and then for the artifact I will choose web application, and then the same thing here I will put web application, and then here will be description, which is web application demo. Here I have web application demo, and the name of the project will be web application. It contains no space, sorry, web application. Okay, now let's look at this, and this will be coding techniques, and you will choose whatever you want because this is the name of my channel. And the coding techniques, okay, I have all these ready. I think we will go to next. And because it is frequently used, the dependencies, you see we have H2 database, Thymeleaf, and then Spring Data, JPA, and Spring Web. Okay, now next. Okay, let's just finish. You see it is importing, it's written importing and getting started. Okay, here is the just initialize Spring application that we have. So up till now it is importing, which is 66%. Let's open this pom.xml. This is where our dependency is, dependency for Marvin. But if we choose grad, then the folder name will not be pom.xml, it will be build.gradle, a Gradle build specification. But this is pom.xml build specification. Okay, you see that here is where our dependencies, you see this is our dependencies. But let's look at these from the beginning. Here we have pom.xml. I said that it is a Gradle, it is a build specification for Marvin. And then here we have web application Java. Okay, this is a class. It is called a bootstrapper class or starter class. This is the class that starts our application, and a class with main method to bootstrap the application. This is a class with main method. Here is our main method that will bootstrap our application. And then we also have a test class. Here is the test class. You see we have web application.test. So this, we said that it is a bootstrapper class, a class that starts our application. Without this class, our application will not be started. So, and then I said that this is a Spring test class. So what is Spring test class? This class is a test class instrumented to load a Spring application context using Spring Boot auto configuration. Okay, now we also have application.properties. Now let's check where application.properties. We have application.properties here. Okay, this class or this application.properties is a property file for you to add configuration property as you need. So we are starting, normally the default port for starting the application, it is 8080. So in this class we can also change it to in this application.properties we can also change it to another port, maybe 8686. There is so many properties that we add to our application here in this application.properties, which you will see later in our project. Okay, now we also have static and this template. This static file is where we keep our CSS file, images, and JavaScript file, and this template here is where we create our HTML file. Okay, this is the overview of the initialized project, but there is also something I left behind, which is pom.xml. So we want to look this pom.xml step by step. Pom.xml, let's go to this pom.xml, and here is our pom.xml, and here we have parent, which starts from here to here, and this group ID. And if you doesn't forget that these properties we have put them ourselves. I have group ID with coding techniques, and then I also set this artifact ID to web application, and then we also have web application demo, which is description. And then let's go to here is where our dependency started with these dependencies. It is different from this one. This contained a single dependency, but this contained all the dependencies, and it is close here. Understand, it is close here, and it contained the dependency that we have, which is Spring Data, Spring Boot Starter, Data JPA, Thymeleaf, and Web. All this we put it ourselves, and here is our H2 database that we have. And then this inherit version from starter parent. This okay, and then let's check out. And the last thing we have is this plugin, which is Marvin plugin. And this Marvin plugin, it is apply Spring Boot plugin. So this is, I think, all about this examining on the Spring Boot project that we just initialized. Now I think what we need is now to run this application. Now let's run the application. Okay, here is how the application is running. You see we have Spring with some console log, and then here is the Tomcat web server. Here is web application, and it is telling us that our Tomcat started on port 8080 with context path. Now if we go to port 8080, let's check here. You see we are having this error. So in the next series we will look at how to write an Spring Boot application, and we will have some message to print something here or to have something here using controller or our Thymeleaf. To handle web requests, we need a controller class. Spring comes with a powerful web framework known as Spring MVC. At the center of Spring MVC is the concept of controller, a class that handles requests and responds with information. Now let's create a class controller that will handle our requests, our page requests, and other requests. Now let's have another package which is sub package to create a class controller. It is not necessary to create package, but for me I want to create package to identify the classes, because we may have different controllers and we may have different class for repositories, so having them in the package will make the code very cleaner and you will identify them easy. Let's have controller. Let's create inside this package, let's create a class home controller, or let's set home page controller. Here is the class controller. To make this class identify by component scanning or discover by component scanning, we need to annotate this class with @controller. Here is the annotation @controller. Here we imported this @controller here. So what is this annotation @controller? Annotation controller, automatically we will have component scanning automatically discover it and create an instance of homepage controller as a bean in a Spring application context. It will be identified as a controller class using this @controller by component scanning. Now let's have a method public string home page view, home page view, and then return string, which is, let's have this hello world. Okay, now that we have this hello world, if we want to have this as a view in our browser using localhost 8080, now here we have nothing, we did not run the application. We want to have this method return this, so we need get mapping this annotation, and we will give it the path where we will get what we want to return here. Let's just give it this path, and this path is the same thing as our localhost 8080 having. Here we have localhost 8080 having this slash. This is the path that we give it, this slash. With this we can access. Okay, now let's go back. Here we have hello world and we have get mapping. We will get this hello world in our browser. Now let's run this and see what we have. But before we run this, since that this is a string and it is not page, we need @response body annotation, @response body annotation. Okay, so let's run this application. Our application is starting. Okay, here we have started on port 8080. We can change the port using application.properties, but here no need to change the port in case this is not the only port we can use. So let's go back to here, and you see here we have hello world. Okay, now let's go back to our program. Without this as response body, even if we run the program, let's run the program again and see what we have. So you see we have web failed to start port 8080. We have to stop the last program here. We can stop it and rerun it again. This happened because we did not stop the last program that we run, and our application is started. Now let's go. Now this will disappear because we have no this at response body, but if we annotate this with address controller, this, let's import the address controller. This address controller contains both the at controller and at response body. Now if we run the program, we stop the program and run it again, we will have the view with name hello world. Now the application is started. Now if we here we have hello world. Okay, now the next is defining view that is using HTML. So let's go to defining view using HTML. Define view, we will go to this template and create an HTML file. This is the location, source, main resources. We have static, which we use to store JS images, and then we will store CSS, and this template we will use to create HTML file. Now we go to order, and then here is HTML file. Okay, now let's name it home page. Home page. You see here we have our HTML file created. Now let's have something so that if we view this HTML file, we will see this in our browser. We will use the controller class to render this in the browser. Now this is, let's write hello world page. Okay, here we have written this hello world. Now if we go back to this controller, we will remove this. Why? Because here, even if we give it home page, it will not render this page. It will render a string home page. But if we remove this address controller and then just leave it as controller, it will render this home page. Now let's stop the program and rerun it again. The program is running. So it started. Now let's go back to this and rerun these parts. Here we have our page, HTML page rendered in browser. This is our page and we rendered it using controller, and you have to note that without this controller, even if we have address controller, we will just have this as a string, but this we have it as a page because it is controller. Now the next thing is we will test this controller using our test class. Now the next thing is testing the controller. To test the controller, we need to go to the test. This is web application.test. Now what we can do is we can annotate this class with @run with, we need @run with spring runner dot class. So we need this, and we also need this @run with class enable spring integration testing, while we also need @context configuration, which specify how to load the application context. Now we need @context configuration, and we will pass this our controller here. So inside this we will pass home page controller dot class. So we will import this home page controller, but we also need to write classes equal to this. Now the arrow is gone, so we need to create another method to test our home page controller, which we will annotate it with test public, which will not return anything, public void, and then let's name it home page controller. And inside this method we will write the test for our controller, but we need to access this method. We need to access this method's home page view. So To access this method, we will create an object. So let's have homepage controller, and also have a variable of homepage controller. By having these, we will create new object, but there is a annotation at AutoWord, so we don't need to create new homepage controller like we used to do, like this new homepage. So this AutoWord inject the object, so it is okay with this AutoWord. Now the next thing we will do is use assert where is a we will assert equals, and then we will look for object. Okay, now we will pass what we have here is expected outcome, so here we will pass home as expected outcome. Expected outcome for what? So here is what we will pass: homepage controller dot homepage view. So this expected outcome for homepage view. So then we will run this program. Let's check for JUnit. Okay, here is the JUnit. So let's run this. This time around we will not run web application, we will run web application test. Okay, now we are testing this controller with this method. Now we have run this program, and so the test is normal and we doesn't have a problem. But what, for example, we have put this expected home as this, we delete this E, and this is the expected outcome home, and here we have this, so it will not. Let's run it again. We will have an error because this home is not the expected outcome. We must have this E. Now let's run this. We have error failure. Here is the stack trace of the error. Web application, here is the stack trace. You will see the stack trace here, and then here is the failure. And as long as we added this home like this, and then we run the application, run the web test, we will have this, we will have no this error, because this is the expected outcome. So this is about the test, and let's have our HTML page here. For we have write it home page, and let's render it. So not with this test, we just want to render this web application as we did before. So it will render this resources homepage.html, and if we access localhost, we have hello world page which we have written inside this application. Next, we will look at how to create a model class to map it to database, which is our embedded H2 database that we created. We need a class which we can map to database, and we have to create another sub-package for the classes which we can map to database. Even that, we can create just a single class to show example, but we need a package. But it is not necessary to have this package. I am just doing it to identify the item and have them in the list properly. So now let's create a class student, and in this class let's annotate the class with @entity, with designating it as entity class, which will be mapped to database, and we will also create private long ID like this, and this we will annotate this with @id, and also annotate it with @generated value, which will have strategy equal to generation type dot auto. So you will be wondering why we have this @id and @generated value. We also have @entity. So @entity, designating it as JPA entity, and the ID property is annotated with @id and generated value to indicate that this field is the entity identity and that its value will be automatically provided. So now let's have private string, which is student name. So this student's name, and then let's have private string gender. So I am having this, so gender like this, and then we will have private string. This will be integer age. Okay, we have private string gender, private string student name, private int age, and we want to store these in the database. So the next thing we will do is to create a getter and setter. Let's create a getter and setter, generate getters and setters for all the fields. Okay, now that we finish with this, The next thing is that we will look at the JPA that we will use, because it is a bridge between the project class and the H2 database that we have. For the JPA repository, I need another sub package, new package, repository, and then inside this package we will have an interface. The name of the interface, let's name it student repository. Student repository. So object will be persisted to the database because we are using Spring Data JPA. That task is a simple matter of creating an interface that extends Spring Data JPA, and the meaning of the JPA is Java Persistence API. Now we will extend JPA repository, and then let this extend JPA repository, and we have two parameters here. So we will pass the object here, which is student, and we will also pass the ID, the long ID. So let's pass student. We have student here imported from the model class, and then let's have another long here. So this is the JPA repository, which is our repository for student class, which we will use to persist our data to database. By extending JPA repository, this student repository inherit 18 methods for performing common persistence operation. The JPA repository interface is parameterized with two parameters, the domain type and the repository will work with, and the type of its ID property. In addition, we will have another method. We will have a method inside this repository which is of list, and then student, the name of the method, let's have find by. We have find by. So let's look at what we will find this with. Let's just find it with student name. Okay, let's go back to our JPA repository. Find by student, like this, student name. So, and then student name is type of string, then we will have student name. So we will find our stored properties in the database using this method find by student name, and this is all that we can do here in the JPA repository. The next thing is that we will look at our controller class. So okay, here I created a class controller in this sub package that we have created, this homepage, and this class is responsible for HTTP request handling, and we will have post mapping and get mapping. We will use the request get to retrieve a list of students, and we will also use a post mapping that is to set it to the database. Now let's use get mapping, and the path I will pass it, let me pass this so, and have public string. Let's call this retrieve student. Okay, by having this, now we will pass model to this class and return this page. The page that we have is home page. Here is the page in the template homepage.html, and this method will return home page. This P is capital. We will return home page, so, and we will pass the model class here for view model. With this variable we can access the method available in the model class. Now let's use list from Java util, list of student. Here we will have the list of students, and let's have the variable to be list or student list, and then the next thing is that we will use the student repository to access the method that will find the list. So student repository dot at auto-add. So we will access this by student repository dot find by. We have our method find by student name. Okay, so we will change this part to be student name with add path variable, add path like this variable, which with this add path variable we will pass name. Let's just pass the name here, and then we will also have still the name here. So, and then have string to store the name. String, we will not have comma here because with this add path variable we will have it stored in this string. Let's pass the name to the string and then add our model. Okay, this is simple as this. So we will pass the name here, so it will retrieve the names to the student list by this method with the student's name, using the student's name. So the next thing we will use is to have an if statement, so that if the student list is empty, if the student list is not null, so if the student list is not null, we will have model dot attribute, and this is the model dot attribute. Here we will pass the name that we will use in the Thymeleaf for the view. Okay, let's just use student like this. So, and this is what we will have here, the student list. So we finish with this implementation and the post mapping. We will have add post mapping, and the post mapping will also have the same URL. With this URL, we can set the name to the database and then set the object. So public string add student. We will use this to add student. Okay, like this. So here we did not need the model, so that we cannot use this to view. We can just use this to add. We just need this add path variable, and having this add path variable, we will have this also. Let's copy with this comma. Okay, and then we will need the student class here, student class, and the variable student. So, and it is saying that we will return something, since that the method is string. We will return string, but before returning string, let me set this name to our class, student dot set student name to name. Okay, and we can also use student repository dot save. We can save the object, which is entity student here. So what remaining is that we will return homepage. Okay, but before returning homepage, now we just need to return the path of the student, that the part which include the name of the student. So we need to have redirect, and then column slash, and then have this part. This is the implementation of the student controller. The next thing we will look is that we will look for the Thymeleaf, to have the view in the Thymeleaf. So we will have, this is our Thymeleaf, and in this Thymeleaf we will have two div. The first div is that if we have the student available, it will give us the student, and then if we have no student available, we will have the view of no record of student. Okay, now let's have some attribute here, th, unless equal to, we will have the $sign and then hash list is empty, which is unless list is empty. Then let's see which name we set our attribute to in the controller, student controller. So this is the what we set the attribute name student. So let's copy this and go back to the home page. Here is the home page, and then pass it here. So we pass this. So the next thing is that we will have an element span. Let's have it just h2, and then duplicate it to 3, because we have student name, age, and then gender, which we can use to view. So, and then we need a div that will iterate over the list of students. If you have so many lists, let's have div, and then let's copy this to inside the div. Okay, so this is so simple. We can have th each equal to something like this. So we need add. So let's first define the variable student. So like how we iterate with for each, then here we need add, and then we will pass the student attribute here. Student. Since that we set this student to our student here, we can use this to access the property of the student class. So let me copy these to have th. We will have text here, th text, and then equal to. So inside this, let me paste student. We will use this instead of this. We will use the new that we define, student dot. Let's go to student and then copy student name. We can access these members of the class. So let's go back to home page. Okay, now all we can do is to change a little here. By this implementation, we will display the list of the student. So here we need, let's check what we have next is gender. So gender, and then the next thing without looking is age. So, and then here we have p to let's have this p to say no record, unless if we have the record, we will have this no record, but we will have something like this here. Let me copy this. Let me copy this. Th if. So this will be just th if. All we can change is th if. The next thing we can use is the form that we can add our text, which is form. Okay, in this form we will have a method as post, because we will pause this, or we will store this what we have here in the database. Now we will have two labels. The first one is that we will have 4 for gender. We cannot add the student for student because we already set the student in our controller. If we access by the name of the student, it will directly set the student to our DB. Now we will also need input like this. So in this input we will have name, which is the name of the input, name, and also we have type, and then after type we need size at the same time. Size equal to, let's give the size just 40, and the type is text, and then we have the name as gender. So we need to duplicate this to add the age. So here we have age, and also the name is age. We also have break here so that it can break the line that we have. So let's also have break here, and also we can have break here. So the next thing is that you have submit button, which we can use to submit the data to the DB. So we will delete this. Okay, so now this is all we have for the implementation of this class. And then here we can have pause instead of the curly bracket that we have. So I think it's okay for this implementation. Let's run the application. So the application is starting. The application started at 80 now. Let's try to access this in the browser. Localhost. Okay, let's just use this Chrome localhost. So male, and then gender, let's add 10. Let's submit this. So we have Adam, male, 10. This Adam that we have passed here, we have already set it to our setter, and this male which we pass at sender 10, we pass at the age. Okay, now if we can pass another male and the age 22, we will have the same Adam, unless if we use here to change the name. Okay, if we change the name here and then add, we can also have the change of name Aliyu, male, and then 22. Okay, this is all about the